I got some interesting Los Angeles Chargers news for you guys. Of course, as we're getting ready for training camp, football is almost back. It's time to get more and more excited. Of course, talking about new head man Jim Harbaugh in LA. What is he going to do with his Chargers football team? And the reality is, when you bring in a guy like Jim Harbaugh, you're expecting wholesale changes. You're expecting better game planning, better coaching, better in-game management, better player development. But you're also bringing a guy like Harbaugh to think differently and to come up with unique ways, even if it's outside the norm, to address problems on this Chargers team to put them ahead of their competition. And this latest under the radar move by Harbaugh is going to do just that. Let's get into this report courtesy of ESPN. The Los Angeles Chargers have dealt with all sorts of injuries over the last few years, bringing up the question of how the staff works with the players on recovery. Los Angeles has seemed to be one of the more unlucky teams across the NFL, but the organization has been looking at different ways to change the narrative. One way that they're looking to do this in training camp this season. Under new head coach Jim Harbaugh, the Bolts have been setting the new schedule for camp to be staggered. This will help the team with recovery throughout the process. Insider Daniel Popper of The Athletic laid out the plans for the Bolts. Interestingly, the Chargers are going to go with a staggered schedule for training camp. The idea is to create as much recovery time as possible. For example, the first practice of training camp is scheduled for 9 a.m. July 24th. The practice is scheduled to end at 11 a.m. The next day, the practice is scheduled to begin at noon, 25 hours after the previous day's practice is scheduled to end. That July 25th practice is scheduled to end at 1:45 p.m. The next day's practice is scheduled to begin at 3, the day after that, 5. The schedule then resets after every off day. The Chargers are scheduled for an off day July 28th. July 29th, practice is scheduled to begin once again at 10 a.m., so forth and so on. Again, this is all part of thinking differently. It's all part of a smart strategy by Harbaugh. I love this move by the Chargers. Mize, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. But first, Chargers fans, in the comment section below, as we are getting ready for training camp, of course, an exciting time. It's time to look ahead to the 2024 Chargers season. Give us the one game, the one matchup, the one week you're looking forward to more than any other. There's obviously a lot of great rivalry games, a lot of great matchups, both at home and on the road. But give us the one game you're looking forward to more than any other and put it in the comment section below. And while you're down there in the comment section below, make sure you check out the description box below for our affiliate link for some great summer reading for you guys. We're talking, of course, Playmakers by the great Mike Florio. Whether you love him or hate him, he's one heck of a writer. It's a great book giving you the details of the game of football and the National Football League in general. Highly recommend it, obviously, because I bought it myself. I've read it a couple times. It's a great book. So make sure you check out our affiliate link in the description box below. Costs you nothing, helps us out. So make sure you check it out. But Miles, let me throw it over to you now. What are your thoughts on this latest Chargers move?
Yeah, Nick, I think this is great. I think this is a excellent plan devised probably by the second most important Herbert on this Chargers team. Ben Herbert, former Michigan strength and conditioning coach, comes over with Jim Harbaugh. We did a little bit of a story about him, I'd say like 5 months ago or so, right when the move initially happened. But I think this was huge for the Chargers because this Chargers team had a bunch of injury concerns all throughout the season, but now they're getting smart. They're not afraid to change things up. I love the 25 hours in between practices, stuff like that. I think it's a really great move. I think it's going to help people recover. I think that's because as a fan, Nick, I know the teams that we support, the teams that we watch, the worst thing that can happen is when you hear a guy go down in training camp, when you hear a guy go down in mini camp and OTAs. It's the worst feeling as a fan. There's a year last year or 3 years ago with the Baltimore Ravens where I think every single one of their starting running backs went down in training camp, and they start pulling guys out of nowhere. They got like Le'Veon Bell, who'd been out of the league for 3 years, to be a running back. As a fan, that's probably the worst feeling you can have. Probably as a coach as well when your players start going down. So now that they're trying to counteract that, say, look, we know that there's an issue out there. We've been affected personally by this issue. Let's try to correct it. I love that by Jim Harbaugh, not being afraid to come in and say, hey, we've been doing this for years. They've been doing this old way of doing things for such a long time, but I don't care. I'm going to try something brand new and we're going to see if it works. And I think, the logic seems sound. I think it's going to be a great thing for the Chargers, and I expect to see them back next year and healthier than ever.
It's an important thing to understand when it comes to injury prevention, right? A lot of big injuries happen because you have a lot of little minor injuries and you kind of compensate to handle all of those. So, for example, I played college football, D1 AA, nothing big. But we had a regular old school training camp schedule where you had your practice 8 a.m., 9 a.m., whatever it was, every single morning as you work through training camp. And one training camp, I pulled my hamstring because my back was a little stiff and my ankle was feeling a little stiff. And I just overcompensated and I pulled my hamstring. And it was obviously it's a very painful operation for anyone who's dealt with a pulled hamstring. I had to get, electroshock stuff every day just to work through practice. It sucked, right? And that's just part of training camp. That's how most people sit there and say, hey, that's just what happens, right? The Chargers under Harbaugh, they've dealt with a lot of injuries. They're done with, hey, that's just what happens, right? They're done with being unlucky. They're sitting there saying, like you said, we're going to be proactive. We're going to try and solve this by increasing the rest. I honestly believe most injuries, whether it's in OTAs or training camps, occur because coaches just try to put too much on players in too short a time frame, right? It doesn't make sense. Most of these players, especially in the NFL, they already know the offense. You're telling me Justin Herbert, you're telling me, Bosa, Mack, Slater, you're telling me all these guys, Asante Samuel, Derwin James, right? You go down the list of all these really good players. You're telling me they need to go through a lot of reps in training camp? Absolutely not, right? And even a lot of the young guys, right? Once they figure out the offense or the defense and they understand their schemes and strategies, do they need to go 100 reps a day? No. You need to give them great recovery and rest so that way everyone is at peak performance when the ball goes live in September. That's what it's all about. And I think the Chargers are really focusing on that. And I think it's a really great move from Jim Harbaugh. But there's also another element to this I think is really important. When I was going through training camp again, when I played college football, like I said, it was every morning, right? 8 a.m., 9 a.m., whatever it was. It became monotonous. It became a chore. It became incredibly boring and exhausting and physically demanding just because it was so repetitive, right? There was never any new stimulus. You got up at the same time, went to breakfast, practice, had lunch, film all day, whatever, two a day if there's been another practice in the afternoon. It was just, and then rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat for weeks, right? It's monotonous. Everyone gets in a rut after about two practices, right? It stinks. The Chargers here, by switching up the schedule like this, they're avoiding that monotony. They're allowing all the players every day. It's something new. It's new stimulus. It allows you to react. It allows you to avoid the rut and focus on getting better. The players that really need the reps to get better. So I really look at this as a kill two birds with one stone kind of thing. You avoid the rut and the drudgery of training camp, which is a real thing. There's a reason why veterans hold out, right? Because training camp really, really sucks, right? At any level. So they're avoiding that rut, they're avoiding that drudgery, but they're also getting proactive on trying to prevent those injuries. This is a great under the radar move by Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. I think will have a big impact for them this season.